Welcome to If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo. Don, how you doing?
Great. Yourself, Josh?
I'm doing great. We're going to do a special little bonus episode here. Don and I were talking about the start of training camp and thought it might be interesting to kind of take people behind the scenes a little bit. Don is the director of football administration for 15 years, knows quite a bit about what it takes to put on an NFL training camp, kind of the logistics and the budgets behind them. Thought people would find that interesting. And I spent some time at St. John Fisher. And I can give a couple of insights and stories as to what it's like to really grind out an NFL training camp back in the day where there were two-a-days. And clearly I wasn't a player, so the physical aspect of it wasn't quite as difficult, but it was a haul. Yeah. And I didn't enjoy it all that much. Yeah. So, let's start with your role with camp. Maybe tell people a little bit about how camp used to look like in Fredonia, which kind of blows my mind that an NFL training camp of a really successful Super Bowl team was in Fredonia on those couple fields. What was that camp like?
It was a real, the best way I could describe the difference. And now Sean McDermott, I'm sure, has done plenty to temper what I'm about to compare it to. But if you remember in Rocky 3, when Rocky reluctantly agrees to fight Clubber Lang after Clubber publicly, calls out his wife and everything. Yeah. And, Mick, I guess, reluctantly agrees to train him. But then they finally start training and they do like the side-by-side where they show Clubber Lang, Mr. T, is like in his basement, just doing the hardest workouts with a little radio all by himself, just like seriously getting after it. Meanwhile, Rocky's at this public place and having to stop to take pictures, fancy. And yeah. And that's maybe not a fair comparison, but that's kind of what it felt like going from Fredonia to St. John Fisher, because the whole idea was that it was going to be more fan friendly, more fan accessible.
Fredonia was just a couple of fields
that were fenced in, and in order to get to the fields, you had to walk through these two tennis courts. But there was only really one way in, and it was guarded, heavily, and there was only one locker room.
It wasn't Lieutenant Boiler on the scene, was it?
No, he was too busy holding the fort at One Bill's Drive.
Right. Yeah, I was driving around in my Mercury Cougar through the stadium, setting up those stands in '98 and '97. Yeah. So, but everybody stayed in Fredonia.
Everyone stayed in Fredonia in those dorms, and that's the same as St. John Fisher. And like I said, I think I've heard, Sean McDermott does a great job of, making it, fans have a maybe a better vantage point and maybe more opportunities to meet players or see them, but the practices are for real, and once that happens, it's
Fredonia was also like a small town, hour and a half or hour south of the stadium. Did the players hate going to Fredonia?
I think they kind of romanticized it looking back. I don't know that they hated it. I think the team was so close back then that they didn't seem. I didn't hear much griping about it at all.
Interesting.
No.
To think about, those high profile guys going to, it wasn't glamorous, right? You're in state dorms, in the 90s, in the early 90s. Was there air conditioning? They brought their own?
They brought their own, or they could rent them.
Interesting.
They could rent air conditioners. Yeah.
It's kind of amazing to think about, like where like the Cowboys stay, in their facility in Frisco, Texas, which is a hundreds of millions of dollars practice facility. And then you're thinking about, the Bills going to Fredonia or now St. John Fisher. So tell me about when they moved from Fredonia to St. John Fisher. I know that, Russ Brandon went to St. John Fisher, right? And the idea was to bring the Rochester base in and all that. And did you like that move? Was that, like, organizationally, was that the right move at the time?
At the time, I understood why they did it, but I had concerns that have since been alleviated, especially now hearing how, third time I'm going to say, how I heard Sean McDermott strikes the perfect balance, and clearly the team is producing, and he's getting what he wants from them in that environment. There's some differences, though, like when you walk from the practice facility to the locker room. Yes, there's security right there, but then when you go to the dining hall, you're just kind of out there. So
You can't lock down a whole campus.
Right. No. So, but it proved to be a good move. It's a beautiful campus. And I think it's what you do with it. Who's coaching, who runs the camp.
What did St. John Fisher get out of the deal?
Well,
other than publicity.
Publicity is big. It's an intangible. It's hard to quantify exactly what that did, but it'd be interesting to see how it affected enrollment. But the team paid for it. They didn't do it for free.
So they rent all the facilities?
Yeah, we rent the facilities, but then paid for the food. I think that was upwards to about $1 million
for one training camp.
For one training camp
now,
to feed everybody. Yeah.
Was it the Bills? Like, did St. John Fisher provide like the catering and all that?
Yeah, the people were provided by St. John Fisher. Beautiful cafeteria. And that's where you were, right?
Yeah, I stood up and sang the national anthem in the St. John Fisher cafeteria as one of my hazing rituals. I had to stand up and sing the national anthem in front of about 110 people on a nice Wednesday morning. I remember. So, did they upgrade the fields? Did you remember?
I remember hearing that they did upgrade the fields. To NFL standards. There was fields that went like 90 degrees perpendicular to each other. I think they ended up with 3, if I recall. I don't know how many they have now, but and the scoreboard or the clock and it's legit.
Do you so what was it like for the veteran players? Did anybody ever give you any hesitation knowing that they're going to have to go to camp? Did anybody ever not sign in Buffalo? Because the trend is for less and less teams to go away, to not train in their home facility. What was the feedback that you got from players and coaches when they came here and found out, oh God, old school training camp?
There was a little bit of grumbling, but I don't think it was ever a deterrent for someone to, decide to sign or not. They just kind of went with it. It's a necessary part of bonding and all that. But it was. I never heard anyone say, "Oh, I'm not going to sign here," because
So what do you estimate? Like when you 2015, 2016, what was the overall cost to the organization to do it there rather than just to do it at home?
There was a few additional costs. I mean, they still would have had, like I said, the food was probably $1 million.
But they're going to have to pay the players, or they're going to have to do it at home anyway.
Exactly. They would have, Delaware North was going to be providing food like they do during the season, just at camp. But the facilities just aren't there. I remember, John Guy had come from the Steelers and the Raiders, and he was like, "Oh, we got to build a hotel here. We got to build a hotel so, we can have training camp here. And then when free agents come in, we could just put it there. We own the place." And I was like, "Yeah, it's a nice idea, John, but that's not exactly an impulse buy."
Sure. They have to move. I mean, the trainers, the strength and conditioning coach, they got to move everything there.
Yeah, the video department.
Everything.
Yeah, they do. And I remember talking to Henry Kuntu, who we had on a program too, and let's call it a month when it was there 3.5 weeks or whatever, but he had to go early to set up. And he was there for, 30 plus years, 30 times, 4 weeks a year is
he spent
120 weeks.
Wow. He spent a few years of his life.
That's like a decade of his life.
Sure.
Is spent at training camp.
Wow. So did they have, I remember they brought a lot of the weight equipment there.
Oh, yeah, all of
moving trucks. So they would pick up.
Yep.
It's probably different now with like the upgraded facilities and everything at One Bills Drive, right?
Yeah.
But they took everything.
Yeah, because when we would go, I didn't live at camp. I would just go back and forth here a little bit there, meet with the trainers and things. But when we used the weight room after work, I remember going down there. I'm like, oh yeah, they took it all. It was just like
there was nothing left.
Just a few machines around.
What was that month like at One Bills Drive when everyone else was at camp?
Oh, it was nice. I got a lot of work done. I had to prepare for, usually 2 preseason road games. Once the players started practicing again, I would get all the medical bills and the workers' comp and
all that fun stuff.
A lot of injuries, obviously, when they're on the field.
You have 90 players as opposed to 53,
yep.
And they're hitting in pads day after day after day.
Yep.
Whereas during the season, it's almost non-contact. I mean, there's contact, but it's not. Were there two-a-days? When did two-a-days end? Do you
For a
remember?
while, but I think during the CBA, the union successfully negotiated the dismissal of two-a-days.
Were you ever a part of letting guys go at camp?
Not at camp. No. I was I was informed of it as soon as it happened, but usually,
How many player transactions like would happen during camp? Was there a lot of like churn?
they tried to do some weeding out during OTAs. You know, if a guy free agent, if they could tell right away, it's never going to happen, and let's make the move now, so that he doesn't get injured and we have to buy him for 5 weeks or whatever.
Okay.
Whatever it is, 1 week, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever it's determined that the healing process would be. But every cut was accompanied by another signing. Like they always kept the roster at 90. Always. That's not including IR or PUP.
Did guys during camp, did guys fly to Rochester? Or did they fly to Buffalo and get driven to Rochester?
Both. Yeah. Sometimes if they came to Buffalo to sign their contract, or other times where we want to get this guy in the field right away. So sometimes they would send me with a contract to go meet him there. And
so this was all still done like on paper.
The contract will always be pen to paper. Ultimately, even if it's constructed electronically, there always has to be that one signing. Okay. And actually, it's like 6 signings because everybody gets a copy. The agent, the player, the union, the league, the team.
I'm assuming we talked about our upcoming episode about running backs, guys like Travis Henry and Drew Bledsoe not enjoying seeing you very often because you always wanted something. I'm assuming that when you gave them your initial NFL contract, they were probably a little happier to see you that time, right?
That always went over well.
Okay.
Yeah, that was always exciting. We tried to make a big deal about it too. Like later years, Chris Brown, and we hired him to be, do all the internal work for the website and everything. He would interview the player, and they would get emotional.
I bet.
Yeah, they would.
Especially some of these guys fighting to make a roster.
Yep.
Do you have any memories of guys like really taking it tough, getting let go? Did you hear of any? I mean, is there one or two that stand out to you? Not, whether it's a name that people would know or not.
Langston Walker. Oh man, yeah, big offensive tackle. He got blindsided and he came up to pick up his final check. I didn't know it was his final check. And, oh man, he just looked really, really angry, and he was huge. There were some guys that just never saw it coming, but one of the guys we should get on the program is the person that had to drive them to the airport. His name is Bob Schultz.
Okay.
He's a retired police officer.
Before that, it was Mike Nyland.
Mike Nyland, yeah.
I remember
you remember
him.
Mike, yeah.
I sure do.
Yeah. I mean, they got both ends. They got the happy pickups. They got the medium in the middle, and they had to drive them to the doctor's office and hospital and surgery and back. But they also had to drive them back to the airport when they were cut. And
I always found it I remember when I interned there, and Mike was hanging around, and I always found it interesting that they had like a full-time, he was like transportation, but he was like full-time, right? He was there available every day.
Exactly. Yeah.
Every day he was available because there was just always either somebody coming or going or whatever else. What were the rules on that? Was that NFL wide where there's always be a driver for these guys? Because, if you're getting signed by somebody, you're not going to rent a car and do all that. Like, is it just expected that you're going to get picked up and brought to wherever you're going to go?
It was expected. We had other vehicles too. We had a van. We had the van was putting on some years, but then we also had like 2 expeditions or Yukon expeditions, like the really big, because these guys, if they needed the room, if they were a 6'6", tackle with their leg in a cast straight, I mean, you needed all the room. You couldn't put them in a car.
Was there
close?
So if they were hurt, did they come back to Buffalo?
Not during camp usually, unless they had to see the doctors. The doctors all operated out of Buffalo. They would make a trip to camp here and there. But they would have to come back to Buffalo to see the doctors. Yeah.
So around the building, was it how many people were left? It was like 20% of the staff. The marketing people are still, some of the marketing people are in Rochester.
Yeah.
Was it like 20% of the staff?
I would say a third of the staff was left back, and we enjoyed it.
Sure. Were the hours a little more lax?
It was just easier to get stuff done because you didn't have all the traffic And we used to kind of joke, like when camp was over and we would see one of the, we knew it was happening, but you'd see one of the video guys and like, they're back.
Back to school.
Yeah. And then
was there no free? There was no meals.
No, there was no meals. That was nice to get that back again too. I think maybe one of the years that it was fun was they really upgraded the locker room, and they were doing it all during the season or the OTAs. So they had the players in the stadium locker room while the other one was under construction. But it got done by the time they came back from camp, and I want to say that was like 2013 or 14 or something. And they came back, and I happened to be down there. And the players were like, it was Christmas morning, like, whoa, like screaming, or, what's that show, the Home Makeover?
Yeah.
Move that bus.
Sure. Extreme Makeover. Yeah.
There's a foosball.
Yeah.
Table.
It's a beautiful locker room now from what you can see compared to what it was.
To me, it looked like, okay, if you want to impress a free agent, this would be like lots of room, tons of room.
People might not realize that the main locker room that the players and the coaches use during the week is attached to the field house.
Right.
You only use the stadium locker room on game day.
Yeah, it's like a road game, like just with a teeny little trip.
Right. That's why people have asked me, oh my God, they're going to go across the street to the new stadium. What's with the locker room, whatever. But you only use the stadium locker room on game days.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Remember we had Woody Ribic on, and he was talking about that was a big pain to do that every week. Well, every home game anyway.
Right. And they're going to obviously have to cross over Abbott Road with equipment and all to the new stadium. Anything else you remember about camp? Any fun stories?
I was amazed at, when I did stay over there. I would have thought, like you said, even though you weren't playing, you were pretty spent at the end of the day.
Yeah. For me, it was all encompassing. I remember the days we had a 2-a-day, or even the days we had practice, you'd get like an hour to it kind of from like noon to 1 kind of. And at the time I was dating this girl, and this was pre-cell phone. I don't even think I had a cell phone. And I had her call my dorm room because I had a stand-up air conditioner. I would blast it before I left. It was really cold. And I'd just try to catch like a 20-minute nap.
Yeah.
And I'd have her call the room to wake me up because I didn't trust the alarm clock. I didn't want to oversleep. I didn't want any of that. But like I was shot, because those were long days, and there was meetings, there were team meetings, there were player meetings. And then after all of that, there were coaches meetings. And, I had to be available for all of that. So it was probably like a 14 or a 15-hour day. And it felt longer than at home. And because there was a rhythm to the week, during the season.
Sure.
And by Thursday, Friday, Saturday, those days were much lighter. Whereas during camp, it was just one day after the next day after the next day. And then the days off were either traveling for a preseason game or, I think we had one day off where I drove all the way back to Buffalo. And then I realized, what the hell did I do this for? Because I'm just going to have to go back the next, And you did like laundry and all that. It was all encompassing.
Yep.
It was like going to camp for a month, 5 weeks.
Call it camp for a reason, at least 4. It varied a little bit.
It's much shorter now.
Yeah, this year, I guess they're staying till like the 10th of August.
Okay.
And coming back and doing everything at One Bills Drive after that. But Sean McDermott still sees the value in having the guys all at one place, bonding or whatever you want to say.
The players do get a lot of downtime there. And I remember there were a lot of card playing. And I can see where the value is in the team building aspect, that these guys are stuck together in a small confined place. There's curfew every night. You've got control over these guys. There's not going to be any incidences of going out doing whatever. You really do control the environment for at least those 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, that always amazed me with the staff though. When I went, and like these guys found their second wind at night, and they would be up,
all hours. Yeah,
hours. They were up in the morning. So
some of those guys didn't sleep. The marketing guys, they put their time in during the day and at night.
Yeah.
So I thought everybody would just enjoy that. A little quick thing behind the scenes at camp, and hopefully everybody enjoyed this episode. Please like and subscribe. And then on Sunday, our look at the 20 most interesting running backs from Thurman Thomas to today.
Yep. And then tight ends, former Bills tight ends. We're going to ask them for their advice for
Dalton Kincaid. You got his first name right this time. Take care, everybody.